In July 1518 in Strasbourg, France, a woman named Frau Troffea went out into the street and began a dance routine that lasted several days. By the end of the first week, 34 locals had joined her. Then the crowd of dancers grew to 400 participants. This mysterious plague was called the Dancing Plague or the 1518 epidemic. A terrible and mysterious disease. Many publications and television stations celebrated the 500th anniversary of the beginning of the strange epidemic with their publications and programs. For example, the Public Domain Review magazine, UK, published an article titled The St. Witt's Dance of 1518. Its author, Ned Penentray, provides interesting details about the mysterious illness. On hastily constructed scaffolding in front of Strasbourg's busy horse market, crowds of people dance to pipes, drums, and horns. They jump from foot to foot, spin in a wiggle and shout loudly. From afar it may look like carnival goers having fun at a carnival. But a closer look reveals a more disturbing scene. Their arms are dangling, and their bodies are twitching convulsively. Their clothes are tattered, and their faces, distorted with agony, are covered with sweat. Their eyes are glassy and express nothing. Blood oozes from swollen feet into leather boots and wooden shoes. These are not walkers, but choreomaniacs, deeply obsessed with dance mania. It was then, in the middle of the summer of 1518, that the chorea that was tormenting Strasbourg, which was also known as the St. Vitus dance, reached its climax in front of everyone's eyes. This was the deadliest and best documented outbreak of the 10 similar cases that had broken out on the banks of the Rhine and Moselle since 1374. Another chronicle describes a less fortunate end. In the year 1518 AD, people began to be stricken with a terrible and strange disease called the St. Vitus dance, and they, seized with madness, danced day and night until finally they fell unconscious and died. The physician and alchemist Paracelsus visited Strasbourg 8 years after the epidemic and was fascinated by the description of those events. According to his treatise Opus Paramirum and various chronicles, it all began with one woman. On July 14, Frau Troffea danced in the narrow cobblestone street outside her wooden brick house. As far as we know, there was no music. She simply started dancing. Ignoring her husband's pleas to stop it, she continued to dance for many hours until the sky turned black and she collapsed to the ground in a twitching heap from exhaustion. The next day she rose again on her swollen legs and danced before she could quench her hunger and thirst. On the third day, a growing motley crowd of people, merchants, porters, beggars, pilgrims, priests, nuns, reveled in the monstrous spectacle. Frau Troffea was possessed for 4 to 6 days, after which the frightened authorities intervened and sent her by cart to Saverne, 30 miles away. There she could be cured at the shrine of St. Vitus, who they believed had put a curse on her. But some of those who watched the strange spectacle she had put on began to behave in exactly the same way, and in a few days more than 30 choreomancers were dancing, some so possessed that only death could stop them. The more citizens contracted the plague, the more desperately the secret council tried to bring it under control. The clergy regarded it as the retribution of St. Vitus, but the councillors preferred to listen to the Guild of Physicians, who declared that the dance was a natural disease caused by overheated blood. Therefore, according to the humoral theory, those who were sick should have been bled. But instead, doctors recommended a different treatment that was supposed to rid the victims of the strange disease. To be cured, they should begin to dance of their own free will. A 16th-century chronicle by the architect Daniel Speckland describes the measures the council took to do this. Carpenters and tanners were commanded to turn the halls of their guilds into dance floors for a time and to set up scaffolding in the horse and grain markets in the public eye. To keep the cursed in motion and thereby promote their recovery, dozens of musicians were hired to play drums, violins, pipes, and horns, as well as healthy dancers called upon to inspire the sick. The authorities hoped to create the best possible conditions for the dance to exhaust itself. This had dire consequences. Most spectators were more inclined to trust a supernatural explanation for the dance epidemic than the medical one, so they saw in the frenzied movements of the victims a demonstration of the extent of St. Vitus's wrath. Since everyone is not without sin, many also succumbed to this mania. The Imlands family chronicle records that the dance enveloped 400 citizens in 1 month. Authorities in disarray. Ned Penentray further recounts, the Privy Council has ordered the dismantling of the scaffolding. If the choreomancers could not cease their disturbing movements, let them go out of sight. The council went even further, banning almost all dancing and music in the city until September. In addition, the council ordered that the most possessed be loaded into carts and sent on a 3-day journey to the shrine of St. Vitus, where Frau Troffea was cured. The priests laid the choriamaniacs, who kept twitching like discarded fish, under a wood-carved image of Saint Vitus. They gave them little crosses in their hands and put red shoes on their feet. On the shoes themselves and their soles they sprinkled holy water and drew crosses with consecrated oil. This ritual, performed under the scent of thick incense and chants in Latin, had the desired effect. Soon news of this reached Strasbourg, and more people were sent to Saverne to receive the forgiveness of Saint Vitus. Within a week or so the stream of suffering pilgrims had all but waned. The epidemic of dancing lasted a little over a month, from mid-July to late August or early September. When it raged most violently, 15 people died each day. It is not known how many lives were lost in total, but if this daily death toll is accurate, the total death toll could be in the hundreds. But if it wasn't an angry saint or overheated blood that caused the disease, what was it? According to Paracelsus, Frau Troffea undertook her dancing marathon deliberately in order to embarrass Mr. Troffea, to make the deception as plausible as possible, and to give the impression of a real illness. She jumped and sang, which was very unpleasant for her husband. Seeing how successful this trick was, other women also began to dance to annoy their husbands, inspired by loose, impertinent and obscene thoughts. Although the famous fighter against prejudice, Paracelsus, sues confessions for looking for the causes of disease in the mind of choriamancers rather than in heaven, yet his misogynistic diagnosis now seems somewhat ridiculous. Scientists' versions. The author then reviews the versions of modern historians who claim that the choria epidemics that raged in medieval Europe were caused by ergot, a mind-affecting mold found on raw eye stalks that can cause twitching, seizures and hallucinations. This condition is also known as St. Anthony's fire. However, historian John Waller debunked the ergot hypothesis in his book on choria, A Time to Dance, A Time to Die, 2009. Yes, ergot can cause convulsions and hallucinations, but it also restricts blood flow to the extremities. People poisoned by it simply would not be able to dance for days on end. Waller explains the cause of choria by drawing on his intimate knowledge of the material, cultural, and spiritual environment of 16th century Strasbourg. He opens his book with a quote from Erich Madelford's A History of Madness in 16th Century Germany, 1999. The madnesses of the past are not fossils that can, without damaging them, be taken out of their vaults and placed under our modern microscopes. Rather, they resemble jellyfish, which disintegrate and dry up when extracted from the sea water around them. According to Waller, the poor of Strasbourg were prepared for an epidemic of hysterical dancing. Above all, they knew the precedent. All outbreaks of choria in Europe from 1374 to 1518 occurred near Strasbourg, along the western borders of the Holy Roman Empire. Then favorable conditions developed for it. By 1518 a succession of bad harvests had occurred, political instability had set in, and the appearance of syphilis caused anguish and longing that was extraordinary even for those times. All this anguish culminated in hysterical dancing as citizens believed it could happen. People can be extremely suggestible, and the certainty of Saint Vitus's vindictiveness was enough to make it appear to them. The minds of the choriamaniacs were turned inward, Waller writes, and cast into the turbulent depths of their worst fears. Ned Penentray offers this explanation. One way to shed light on the essence of choria is to consider the trance states that people achieve today. In various cultures around the world, for example, in Brazil, in Madagascar, in Kenya, people deliberately enter into trance during some ceremony or involuntarily during extreme stress. In the trance state they ignore the sensation of pain and exhaustion. Waller describes the spread of the dance plague as an example of mental contagion and draws a parallel to the laughter epidemic that occurred in an area of Tanganyika, modern-day Tanzania, in the difficult post-colonial period in 1963. When a couple of girls at the local mission school started giggling, their friends followed suit, and by now 2/3 of the students were laughing and crying uncontrollably, so that the entire school had to be closed. Once home, the students infected their families, and soon the entire village was gripped by hysteria. Doctors recorded several hundred seizures that lasted on average a week. The same explanation is given by the Discovery Channel and Endeavour magazine. After many unsuccessful attempts to uncover the background to this unusual phenomenon, only now historian John Waller, a professor at the University of Michigan and author of Time to Dance, Time to Die, The Extraordinary History of the Dance Plague of 1518, has managed to unravel the mystery that has so long occupied the minds of scientists. These people, Waller writes, were not merely shaking, trembling, or convulsing as if in a trance, their legs and arms moving as if they were purposely performing dance movements. Eugene Beckman, author of Religious Dancing in the Christian Church and in Popular Medicine, drew attention as early as 1952 to biological or chemical causes of such dance mania. He and other experts believed that the underlying cause of such mass phenomena was mold spores that formed in moist rice stacks and were caught in the bread. Yes, Waller agrees, such mold can cause creepy convulsions and hallucinations, but not coordinated movements that can last for days. Furthermore, insists the researcher, there is absolutely no evidence that the dancers wanted to dance. Moreover, they experienced despair and fear. One such fear, originating in religious legend, was that if one or another person invoked the curse of Saint Vitus, the early 4th century Sicilian martyr canonized by the church, he could send down an attack on people in the form of inexplicable attacks of dancing, the Saint Vitus dance. Waller believes that it is a phenomenon known as mass psychogenic illness, a form of mass hysteria usually preceded by intolerable levels of psychological stress that causes such dance epidemics. The victims, the scientist explains, often fall into a state of involuntary trance, which is fueled by psychological stress and anticipation of the transition to an imposed state. Thus, in groups of people who have faced the most severe social or economic turmoil, the trance can be extremely contagious. At least 7 outbreaks of dance epidemics are known in the areas around Strasbourg during the Middle Ages. In modern history, there is a known case on the island of Madagascar, where in the 1840s the inhabitants, according to medical chronicles, danced wildly while in a trance state, convinced that evil spirits had taken possession of their souls. A mystery remains a mystery generally speaking, something like this often happened in medieval Europe. For example, in the story of the Pied Piper of Hameln, Germany, when the Pied Piper also, with the help of some kind of suggestion, stole 130 children without a trace. This is the same manipulation of the minds of the inhabitants. As revenge on the ungrateful citizens, Pied Piper most likely led the children into the swamp. And how did the Pied Piper control the rats? With the help of some unknown superstition. In principle, it is possible to agree with the definition mass hysteria, but with the essential clarification that it is controlled and consciously caused by someone. However, there is a possibility that the source of the epidemic was Frau Troffea herself, perhaps not even aware of her psychic abilities to influence those around her. After all, as soon as she, with whom it all began, was cured and stopped going crazy, the whole epidemic ceased at once. And, of course, we can't exclude the version that she herself organized everything, being a witch. If you were interested, thank the author by putting a like. And also do not forget to subscribe so as not to miss the outputs of even more interesting videos of my channel. Turn on notifications by clicking on the bell and share this video with your friends. What else interesting can you add to this video? Write in the comments, it will be interesting to read.